Welcome to Thanks for Visiting, a podcast that's part conversation, part time capsule. I'm your podcast host, Lex. In these minutes and moments, I'm sitting down with people I deeply respect and admire to explore life, the human experience, and the creative spirit. Together, we're creating our visitor records, snapshots of our existence and contributions while we're visiting here on planet Earth. Let's help each other navigate this wild human adventure called life.
And you can be totally free. You can totally release that person from the debt, what they did, what they failed to do. That doesn't mean you resume the relationship the way it was. Forgiveness is a choice, plain and clear, but it's so important to know what you are forgiving.
On today's episode, I'm speaking with my best friend, my mom, Sandra, on the topic of forgiveness and what that does and doesn't look like. Thanks for being here, Mama Bean.
It's great to be here, Lex.
I wanted to sit down and talk to you specifically about forgiveness because this is a topic we've discussed a lot over the years, and also because it's a topic you discuss in the book you wrote, heck yeah, that came out last year, February 2024, called, give us the title.
It's called The War for Peace, a holistic approach to emotional wellness.
Heck yeah. And it is available on Amazon and where else, Mom?
All the major big box bookstores, as well as individual privately owned bookstores.
They can request it.
Yes, through any of those venues, and it's available worldwide.
Heck yeah. I have to say, as a young woman, as your daughter, I think it's very inspiring to see you write a book. I know that you worked very hard on it. As you put it, it's a labor of love.
True.
Before we jump into forgiveness and unforgiveness, do you want to talk a bit about your process with writing this book?
Yes, I actually started working on it in 2017, and it was supposed to be a seminar for emotional wellness, and there was just so much information that I said, we got to regroup. It's going to be 2 seminars, and then it's 3 seminars. The idea came into my head, write a book, and I actually was taken back, like, write a book? I'm not an author. I've never had any desire or thought of writing a book, but it made so much sense in that moment. I'm like, write a book. It makes sense. That way, then I started just segmenting everything out, and everything centers around emotional wellness. The things that are physiological, environmental, part of our DNA, or anything that makes up us physically, and as well as emotionally and spiritually. And any one of those that are lacking, there's going to be an imbalance. We need to have wholeness in all 3 areas, and all 3 areas affect us emotionally. The primary objective of the book is to deal with the emotional effects.
When you say 3 parts, is that spirit, soul, body?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Because you're talking about holistic. And for people who don't know that term holistic, you're not just focused on one aspect of someone's being. You're focused on
Correct.
all of these, which I think is really important, really important. And I think society is finally kind of looking at people more holistically and less one area.
All 3 elements are important. There's the physiological, there's the emotional, and there's spiritual. Having a balance of all 3 is very necessary for holistic wellness. And a deficit in any one can upset the other. For example, if you have emotional upheaval, you have things that are not healed, things that are any kind of trauma, any kind of
like unresolved,
unfinished business, yes, can actually affect you physically. We know that.
Totally. That makes sense because with what I researched, studies show that from a physical health perspective, forgiveness lowers blood pressure and strengthens the immune system. On a mental health level, it improves clarity, self-esteem, and emotional regulation. And then emotionally, forgiveness reduces stress, anger, and bitterness. So I say we just jump in, because on chapter 7 in your book, you cover the topic of unforgiveness in the chapter called Entanglements. Can you just give me an idea of why you call this Entanglements?
Yes, what I list in this chapter are several things that keep us entangled where we're not feeling that emotional release. Things don't go away. Time doesn't heal wounds. It's truth that brings peace that heals wounds. And we can stay entangled. We can stay stuck. And one of the things that keeps us stuck is unforgiveness.
Right on. So I'm going to jump in and read on page 69 from chapter 7, Entanglements, an excerpt of your book. You say, unforgiveness is one of the major roadblocks to receiving emotional freedom. Without close examination, you are often unaware of harboring this burden. Carrying around unforgiveness is like trying to run a race with a ball and chain around your ankle. Unforgiveness keeps toxic feelings alive and keeps you connected with the person or the event that initiated the offense. How often have you been instructed to just let it go when someone has betrayed you? Moreover, how often have you genuinely tried to do just that with little or no lasting effect? When you forgive the offender without considering the weight of the offense, the negative feelings will just resurface when future situations trigger your lingering pain. Jesus illustrates true forgiveness in a story about a servant who owed a debt too great ever to repay. When they present the debtor to the king examined what the debtor owed, but did not examine the debtor himself. He then chose to cancel the debt, which released the debtor. To experience permanent forgiveness, consider the weight of the offense, what someone did to you, what someone denied you, and the cost to you. Can you release that? If not, consider the belief that is causing your hesitation. So I think this is really big. Because when I hear about forgiveness, in the worldly sense, it's forgive and forget. And to me, forgetting, that's delusional. If you're trying to deny an event happened, that's deception, that's delusion. I'm not trying to operate in a delusional world. So I think it's really important when people say forgive and forget, that's just impractical, right? Like,
yes, definitely.
Can you tell us what's wrong with that, the implications with that?
Yes, I know just from personal experience when I have been willing to forgive someone of an offense, but yet it's not really resolved because I can once again be triggered with this person when something else occurs because I've not really examined what was it I let go. And that's why I love this story that's in Matthew 18, and I highly recommend, if anybody wants to understand this further, to read that chapter, because in this book, this man owed the king a great debt. It was massive, and he said, I'll pay it back. Please have mercy on me. But what the king did, he didn't forgive the man. He said, show me what he owes. He wanted a list of what that man's debt was to the king. In the process, he never examined the man. He examined the debt, and he chose to release it. And in that process, the man was set free. And how that applies to us with unforgiveness, if you're willing to forgive and you want to understand this process of forgiveness, the very first step is taking account of the debt. What is it they did to you or failed to do that you expect them to do? And you make a list of that. These are the ways this person hurt me, offended me, was not there for me.
Do you recommend actually writing that down?
Yes, I think it's very therapeutic writing anyway. I love to write. The other reason it's really important to write it down is in this process, when I take someone through this process, after, even as they're saying it to me, I'm writing it down for them.
Because that's what we've done before.
Yeah, it's individual with people, because oftentimes, when they come, we just start talking about whatever it is the initial pain, which is often not really the initial core issue that's anchoring the pain. They're presenting the symptoms of the pain. And so it's just figuring that out first of all, just talking to them. And oftentimes I don't jump right into like taking account of the debt, but often that is the first thing that surfaces. And often it's one of the first assignments I will give someone after having a conversation and seeing who this particular person is. Sometimes there's more than one, but sometimes there's a particular person that is at the root of their pain. And so I explained it to them where this concept comes from biblically, and I always engage their will. Are you willing to look at this and see what this debt is? Usually people are. I mean, because they so want to be set free. They're willing to do whatever they have to be set free and to have this peace. So,
but that's good that you engage their will, because some people don't want to be healed or aren't in a position ready to look at their pain.
Exactly.
And I will say I think anytime someone is looking at their emotional wellness, unforgiveness, they're brave. Hurt people, right? Healed people, heal people. Anyone who is willing to look internally and look at their emotions and confront them, massive applause for you. So I like that. You engage the person's will. Are you willing to look at this unforgiveness aspect?
Right. The debt that is involved with that. I explain what that debt is. It's individual for each person. And the reason, as saying previously, writing it down, the reason that's important that we write it down is because then we go through each line individually. And then I ask, is there any hesitation to release it? And I tell them, be honest about this, because we need to know, because oftentimes there is. If you don't address the hesitation, the person just goes, yeah, this is the debt. Yeah, I'm letting it all go. That's not always as effective, because there may be hesitation in one or two of those areas. So you look at each thing individually. This person wasn't there. This person hurt me. This person lied to me. This person cheated on me, whatever it was. Mm-hmm. And then you say, is there any hesitation to let that go? And I would say 90% of the time, it's like, no, I'm so ready for this to be done. No, I want to let that go, let it go. But sometimes they'll say that, I'm not so sure. And then I'll say, okay, and that's fine. The honesty is necessary, because then the next step we go to is finding out what's anchoring that, because there's always a lie. So I will say to them, what is it that you believe? So I ask the belief. There's a belief anchoring that lie. What is it you believe would happen if you let that go? And they always know right away. They always know.
Is there a theme to that?
Not necessarily. Sometimes it's like they'll get away with it.
Yes, I think that's a major one.
That would be common, but we don't assume anything.
Right.
Sometimes someone will say they don't trust themselves. Sometimes people will say, if I release this, I'm going to be taken advantage of again, or I'm going to set myself up again. And another one that I have, one of the ones that was more interesting to me, is someone who was in a relationship that was broken off, like close to a year. They were still grieving and still having a hard time getting past it. So we looked at what happened in this situation, how this person hurt you. And there was a hesitation when we looked at the debt. Tell me, what is it that this did to you? Let's look at that debt. Wrote those things out. And as I asked, is there any hesitation to release this? And the person was like, they couldn't fully forgive this person. And I said, okay, why is that? And she said, because then they'll be gone. Mm-hmm. And I'm thinking in my mind, he's been gone for almost a year. But
that was her tether, entanglement.
Yep.
That's really,
I found it fascinating.
Quite emotional.
Yes.
It's sad, right? This person's grieving.
She was crushed. There's been only a couple occasions where somebody was just, no, I'm not willing to.
Because it still kept them connected in a
way.
Do you see that even in death, the loss of a loved one, do you see have people come to you because they're struggling with a relationship they had with someone who passed, or forgiving someone even for dying, kind of thing?
I think in those situations, they don't even know, because it doesn't make sense. Usually, like I said, they're unaware. When it comes up is when we're looking deeper at things, like what they're feeling, things that they're going through. And the emotions are connected. Like, you might not know. You might not ever relate what you're feeling today with something out there in the world or this person or situation. You don't connect it with this back here unless you take time to self-reflect. You take time to examine yourself. I love doing that. I do that.
What does that mean to you?
Yes, almost every morning. I don't do this at least several times a week. That I, in my quiet time, my prayer time, I say, God, examine my heart and show me if there's anything that I need to release. If there's anything going on in me that is could be used against me in any way. And I like to point out, show me my blind spots. Because guess what? Other people see them. I don't want other people to know what I don't know.
There's what you don't know what you don't know.
Exactly.
Right.
And I get revelation when I ask those questions. It's really incredible.
Because you're humbling yourself. And people have a misconception of what that word means. But you're really, to humble yourself and say, like, I know I'm flawed. Like, show me my flaws is a bold prayer. Because I do think God will be happy to answer that prayer.
Yes, but you know what? The way he does it is not like anyone else. You hear it and you say, thank you. I'm so glad. It's never condemnation. That's a whole other topic. This is not that. This is like a relief. There's a scripture about faithful are the wounds of a friend. That's like, even when a friend tells you something like, oh, that really stings, but you're right. This is true about me. Those types of things.
Because it's done from love, because they care.
And it's like, I don't want to hear it, but I've had those conversations a couple times, and they were from people that genuinely loved me and cared about me, and it did not feel good at the time, but I'm like,
oh yeah,
okay. And that's how it is when I hear from the Holy Spirit in my quiet time, when I say, examine my heart, show me what's not right. And that's on a regular basis, and I'm telling you, it is the most liberating thing. It's like you don't have any of these entanglements, no shackles, no trying to run a race with a ball and chain. Like, you're just running the race in life. And it's a choice. Forgiveness is a choice, plain and clear. But it's so important to know what you are forgiving.
Yeah, so let's talk about what forgiveness isn't, right? In order for us to talk about what forgiveness is, and we've started that conversation, let's also take a little moment to talk about what it's not. Forgiveness is not forgetting the harm done, right? It's not forgive and forget. It's not just forgetting what was done.
You're not rewriting history.
Boom. Perfect. I also like to point out this could be a difficult conversation, right? Because you might be thinking, if you're listening and you're thinking of someone that hurt you or people that hurt you, it can be hard to think of, like, you're asking me to forgive this person, but you have no clue what they did. So I also want to take this time to say, forgiveness is not pretending things are okay when they aren't. It's not acquiescing just to avoid conflict. It's not avoidance in general. It's not like, oh yeah, I forgive you just because I want to sweep this under the rug. It's not forgiveness if it's forced. If you and I have a conflict and you say, you've got to forgive me, I'm your mom, at some point you need to forgive me, that's not forgiveness, that's control, right? And it's not manipulative. Can you just let it go already, right? Do you have anything to kind of add to that? Because I feel like I've got to say this, like, you've taught me about the power of forgiveness, and you've also taught me about the power of boundaries.
Yes, it's a great combination. All of those points are valid, and they're true. In fact, we have to watch that any of those can't be an anchoring point to releasing the debt.
Can you tell me more about that?
Yeah. So
what do you mean by that?
Well, some of those things were the reasons that people might have subconsciously. Until we actually sit down and look at this, people don't even know. I never knew. I never knew that I might not want to forgive because I think someone will get away with it, or I feel like I'm telling them what they did was okay, or now I have to be in relationship with this person. None of those things are true. The forgiveness, it's something you do to unhook yourself. If it's a toxic relationship, you don't keep the relationship, but you stay attached if you're not forgiving. So you can detach from it And you can be totally free. You can totally release that person from what they did, from the debt, what they did, what they failed to do. But you don't have to, that doesn't mean you resume the relationship the way it was. It depends. Every situation is different because reconciliation depends on the other person. Like you can forgive them, but there's no change on their part, and that's okay. You still say, you know what, I release the debt. And in doing so, you release yourself.
Can you give us an example? Because you're getting into some really good stuff, but I want to paint a picture more for people and like kind of put them in a scenario to see how this process of forgiveness that you're describing would really look like. Is there an example, like a universal example that you can give us?
Yeah, I think a good example would be if somebody has slandered someone else.
Like gossiping and lying about
And
them?
not just gossiping, saying things that are true, but fabricating a story, just outright lying for whatever their purpose was, or distorting something that happened, making it look more sinister when it was not. There's a variety of reasons that happens. And in those situations, when you are the victim of that, that's a good example where you can take account of the debt. Like maybe it cost you relationships. Maybe it cost you a job. You know, maybe your own family members don't believe you. Whatever it is, it can be a heavy, heavy cost. And I think it's really important to take account of what this debt is, because that can be a massive debt.
So when you're talking about debt, that can be hard to wrap your mind around, but I like this, like the price tag, right? Like
Right.
You're saying it could have lost you your job, it could have lost you a significant relationship or your reputation, that being the debt, right?
Yes.
So like how would you continue from there?
Yes, that's a very good point, because debt's not a word that we often think of in the situation, but it is. It's like something that we feel was not repaired, something that was owed to us. Is how about just the truth? How about just don't lie about me? And oftentimes we don't even know how far and wide those tentacles go. So it's not like you can go around to everyone and say, no, that's not true. Just deal with the debt. And I've been in this situation. When you let go of it, you let go of it. In fact, there was a point where I felt like a situation that I was in, I remember my words were like, but it's my character. And I had to like lay that down as well. Like people might misinterpret who I am. And I had to let that go. And I said, you know what? I release it. Let God do what he does. Let him be God and let me just release it to him. And so when we do that, that's a good example of you don't reconcile with this person. It's like the saying, when someone shows you who they are, believe them.
Amen.
So you don't pretend you're still friends. Sometimes, I think when I was younger, I confused the two, forgiveness and going back to everything being the way it was. No, it can't be the way it was. But that does not mean that everything that I'm completely free on my side. Like what they do about it is up to them, but I've released them from my end.
So on that note, can we back up a bit of like those steps to use this example of gossip, slander, someone lying, misrepresenting you? I like this idea of what you're saying, writing it down. So if I were to do that, if I'm like, I'm really struggling with forgiving this person because they hurt me, what are some examples of that in this situation? So I'd be saying like the debt they owe me is not lying. Like how do I phrase that? Like not lying about myself.
The friends that I lost, or
like the actual loss.
The loss, like, or the things that I would have had that I don't have.
So it's like I lost my job over it. I lost friends over it. I lost this relationship. Respect. People question my character, like that kind of stuff.
Yeah, it doesn't have to even be detailed of that, because that kind of falls into the same category. But that situation might not have a lot of debt. It depends. There can be layers. For example, I went through this process years after my father died, my birth father, and I write about him at the very beginning of my book. So generally, I forgave my father even before he died, and we had a great relationship, totally restored. There were 10 years I never saw him, and we reconciled. It was great. I had no unresolved anger, nothing. But yet, I felt I should still look at the debt. Not for him. He was forgiven by me. We were at total peace, had a great relationship when he died. But for my benefit, I felt inclined one day to just look at the debt of what it cost me that my father was, because he was an alcoholic and because he started spending his money on alcohol and was like irresponsible. We didn't have our house paid for, lost our home. We had to move. But when I recounted that, there was a lot of my childhood lost because I worried about my mom. I didn't want to go to school because I was afraid he'd come home because he would be physically abusive with her. So all these things, my childhood was hijacked. And so I thought I need to be honest about what that was. It wasn't because I was angry at him. I wasn't.
But I think of the word closure. You were getting a sense of closure on an aspect. Yeah.
It was so powerful. I cannot tell you. I spent like an hour or more doing this, and it was so powerful.
What sort of things came up, if you don't mind sharing, of those debts? Like you even said, like, loss of your childhood a bit, maybe?
Yes, I didn't want to play with other kids on the playground. I was always just like, I need to get home. One day I actually left the playground in first grade and walked home. But no one said, why are you doing this? I didn't even know why.
Little Sandy.
Yeah. Yes. In fact, it brought closure to me, showing me that I had good reasons for doing what I did. It's just nobody ever asked me, and I didn't understand it. So it made me unsure of who I was as a woman. It was such a distortion that I wasn't sure who I was. I felt deep, deep loneliness, sadness. I felt abandonment. I didn't know this.
See, that's massive. I want to really highlight this because you're saying, again, time doesn't heal all wounds, right?
Correct.
It sounds like when you're processing this, you're middle-aged, late 30s maybe?
Yeah, it was like 40s. In my mid-30s. Yeah.
So mid-30s, time didn't heal that wound from when you're a young kiddo, because this is a big misconception, right? Time heals all wounds. It doesn't.
And that's the thing, I didn't know. It wasn't until I started going through the process of looking at the feelings that I had, looking at...
Like learning to identify what you're feeling.
Right.
Which I think is massive.
And it's in those times in life when there's any kind of situation, basically anytime there's a lack of peace is an indication there's something we're believing that is rooted in a lie. But we don't know where that's coming from. And that's what, that was the process that I had learned. And when I went through that process myself, I didn't know that I felt abandoned and lonely.
Hence the war for peace.
Right.
Right.
It is a war. You've got to go on the battlefield.
The battlefield is in your mind, right? I really like
And the emotions are the key to what you believe.
So you're saying that you're looking at yourself, you're looking at the emotions. And I like that part about a lack of peace is kind of an indicator to maybe self-examine and to look at the emotional part. I want to point out, when you started your journey with emotional wellness and these sessions with people, and I was one of those people that went through the process with you multiple times. I was 18, and one of the best things I learned from it was identifying my emotions.
Mm-hmm.
Because I remember you would ask, how does that make you feel? And I'd say, well, I feel like that's not fair. And you'd be like, that's not a feeling. What is the feeling? I will say it is so good if people can learn how to identify their feelings, especially when it comes to conflict, interpersonal conflict. A lot of it is miscommunication. Some of that is people not being able to even communicate what they're feeling or what the pain is or what the debt is.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. And the important thing to know about emotions, because people are like, you can't trust your emotions. You can trust your emotions to show you what you truly believe at your core. But you can't trust that to be true. But it is the anchor to your belief. What you're feeling is the anchor to what you believe at your core.
Can you give an example of that with your example of either the gossip and the slander or with your dad?
A good example with my dad was because he left me and abandoned me, that something was wrong with me, that there was something wrong with me, or he wouldn't have left me. And as children, oftentimes we do take on these heavy burdens that we believe they're ours to fix. And so we think I'm not worthy would be an example. I don't remember what
That's big.
Yeah. So when I reviewed this list for the debt, it was pretty extensive with my dad. You know, it included the fact that I lived in fear because that every day I didn't know what to expect. I stopped wanting to have friends over the house because I didn't want anyone to know what was going on in our house. I didn't want to leave the house. I used to stay close. My mom would say, Sandy, go play with your friends. And I would say, no, I'm fine. No, I want to stay here. So my world was getting smaller and smaller and smaller. And then I got in trouble at school because I left at during recess time and walked home. I felt like I needed to be my mother's protector.
And this is all stuff you're writing down on your debt list?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. And then it was the fact that we didn't have enough money because he wasn't bringing money home. It was the shame of losing our home. And it was the fact that we had to have family help us. It's like I felt this, and then I wasn't sure who I was. As I grew up into the teenage years, I was so insecure. I didn't know who I was. It gave me a very insecure foundation. So I elaborated on the things, and then that we were cut off from his family. I lost that whole side of the family, and we didn't see them after that. So there was all this loss and pain, and I didn't know what to do with it. But as an adult, when I look back, I saw how deep that was. Even though I wasn't mad at him anymore, he had already passed on. Our relationship was good, but it was so cathartic for me to see what it really was
in black and white.
And then I said I release it all. I have no hesitation to release all of this and everyone that was involved, including his family, his parents, his siblings that no longer had us in their lives anymore.
May I ask a question there? So, because I think this is really great. You see this list in black and white text on your phone or on written out, and you look at this list, and correct me if I'm wrong, but like you look at this list and you say, I acknowledge this is the debt that my dad or this person owed me, and I choose to release it. Is it that kind of like...
It's that simple. It's that simple. In fact, that took me quite a while with my dad, because it was a lifetime looking back and seeing over my life, like how much more difficult life was for me being so insecure. And then if you feel loneliness and abandonment, then a lot of times people get into situations they would not have ever gotten into, except they're trying to fill some void they don't even know about. So it was like so liberating for me. Plus, because I work with other people through this process, that's why I felt like I need to do this.
Totally.
Because I didn't feel any unforgiveness, but it's like you need to look at what that cost you, how that made you who you are, and the struggles that ensued from that. And so it was really beneficial to me.
Can I ask how did you feel after?
I felt so much lighter and liberated and joyful.
I like the fact that you used the word liberated and light. Because when I've gone through this process with you and I've gone through forgiveness, it really does feel like you've shed layers of weight.
What's really beautiful about it is that the emotions that I had inside, I can no longer relate to feeling abandonment or loneliness, even if I try. They're so removed from me, and they were part of me. They were my dark companion for decades of my life, and I didn't know. But the thing is, people might be hearing this, thinking, I don't feel that. I didn't either. I didn't even know I felt that. I didn't know until I started going on my processing journey, and it was other things that got me to that place that I looked at, and in the process, these were identified. I didn't know that.
The fact that you thought, you know what, maybe I should just look at what that cost me, my dad's alcoholism, and your dad was a man struggling in his own way, right?
Right.
But what that cost you, and it's like, I never got to meet him because of his alcoholism.
Exactly.
You can even take account of a debt where it's like, I have no unforgiveness towards him, right? I never met, but it's like, oh, actually, you know what? I could even say I forgive him for living a lifestyle that may have cut his life short to the point where I didn't get to meet him as my grandfather.
Yep.
It doesn't have to be these big T traumas, or it can be, but it can also be these little things like the person that cuts you off on the highway and you get a bit aggravated and you go, you know what? It's not personal. I choose to forgive them. Their impatience could have caused a car accident. It cost me just reacting, whatever. Yeah.
I will say I choose to release that.
Like for those small little infractions.
I choose to release that because it happened to me on the way driving here earlier today. Somebody cutting right in front of me, no signal. Could have caused an accident. It was like, and of course, it's like shocking sometimes that somebody can be so rude to do that, just cut in front. I could have hit this person. I just said I choose to release you. I don't want to entangle myself.
What I like about you saying that, I choose to release it, it makes me think back into earlier our conversation when you were saying that every morning you ask God to show you your blind spots and that you examine your heart. And that's why I think you are someone who walks through the world truly unburdened. I think the beginning of this process, once we start forgiving and taking account of the debt, we start thinking of all these people or all these things that, well, I guess I need to forgive this person. At some point, I feel like you start shedding this weight, and then it becomes easier for the smaller offenses and infractions where you go, I release that, I release anything there, and I release the person.
Yes, before it can even attach. It's just like, nope. It's just a choice. You don't have to feel it. You can be annoyed. It doesn't matter. You might not want to, but you're like, I'm choosing to. It's just, it becomes a habit, like you said.
Thank you for sharing that story about your dad and what your forgiveness journey looked like through that. I think that's really beautiful. Like you said, you had a good relationship with your dad at the end, which I love that. I'm thinking about what forgiveness looks like when the offense was something that we're willing to forgive, but having a relationship with that person might not be the healthy thing. I'm thinking of relationships where there is abuse of any kind, or even the situation with the gossip and the slanderer, where it's like, that doesn't mean you have to be in a relationship. I want to talk on this point of just because you forgive someone, it doesn't mean you open yourself up for that relationship with them again. Forgiveness does not always look like reconciliation. Can you speak to that and why it's good for someone to forgive, but maybe not to reconcile, or what this word reconciliation means?
And yes, and that's a very good distinction between the two. They don't have to go together. Reconciliation is dependent on the other person. If there's like a repentant change of heart, whatever was done was acknowledged.
Like the offender, like the offending party.
Right.
Like whatever. If I hurt you, I did something hurtful to you.
Right.
It is on my end to make the effort to show you that I'm truly apologetic.
Right.
And that the burden is on me to repair the relationship because I offended, I hurt you, right? Sort of
and
thing.
Sometimes it's a perception thing, like I can be offended by something you did that maybe wasn't like an intentional thing to offend me. So there's...
And I can take the time to explain that, right? Like, that was not my intention, I apologize.
There's a lot of different scenarios to consider, but the bottom line is, if the person who is responsible for some type of toxic or abusive behavior, and if that behavior continues, you can't continue the relationship.
Because you'll be in an abusive relationship otherwise, right?
Yeah.
Just like forgiveness is a choice, if I hurt you and you choose to forgive me, you also get to choose if you want to continue the relationship with me, right? And that can be for a small infraction or a big infraction. Just because you forgive someone, it doesn't mean reconciliation, and that if you reconcile and continue in relationship with someone who continues to hurt you and doesn't change their behavior, that's an abusive relationship. So just making the clear distinction that we're not telling people to forgive and continue to go back into an abusive relationship. I love this idea that you talk about in your book with the entanglement. And the cover of your book is a person and two hands on each side of the person's head and all these strings wrapped around the person and the fingers, showing those entanglements and the ties that bind us. And I just think even in those situations where you forgive someone and there's no reconciliation, you're cutting off those strings. Like, to me, forgiveness is cutting off the unhealthy ties between us and someone. And I even think of your story when you're talking about your dad, when you forgave him and you felt lighter and he's passed at this point. Thankfully, you two had a nice relationship before he passed and you reconciled. And I think that's also because, he worked towards repairing that relationship. Mm-hmm. But even when you forgave him, when he was passed, that lightened you and your emotional load. You cut the negative ties mm-hmm. between you and him. And then you got to keep this more pure, beautiful connection to him, right?
Well said. Exactly.
You have a quote in your book that kind of touches on this. What was that again?
Forgiveness is a gift to the giver. By me forgiving someone else for what they did to me or failed to give me that I needed, it is setting me free. So me as the giver of forgiveness actually receives the biggest gift from it.
Because you're eliminating that entanglement.
Yes.
And then from that place of forgiveness, I think you get to choose a healthier relationship with that person, a healthier relationship with yourself, or you choose from a healthy place to not continue that relationship.
Exactly. There's one other thing that I wanted to mention that's like a little bonus to all of this. I've noticed on quite a few occasions where I'm processing and releasing forgiveness for something, it sets something in motion that the person, there's oftentimes a change in the person's heart. And that is really...
The forgiver's heart?
The person I forgave that doesn't even know.
I believe that. I've seen that myself.
Yes, that is quite incredible.
Well, I have a situation with that where there was someone in my life that I was like, I don't know if I can have a relationship with this person any longer. And I remember thinking, I'm going to choose to be open to having a relationship with them right now, but I kind of need to step it back, get some space, get some distance. I love that idea that two of the best boundaries are time and space. Forgiveness and boundaries go hand in hand. And so I just knew I needed to step back and take some time and space to kind of see the situation more clearly, determine if I needed a break from the relationship. And in that process, I forgave, thanks to the tools that you taught me. I forgave, I took account of the debts, and I released the debts. And I think there was a shift in the other person. And I do believe what you're saying, that in the spiritual or world of physics, that the other person can feel that. Or who knows, maybe they're at this place in their life where they were also doing, I think they were doing some soul examination. It can affect the entanglements on it because I cut the unhealthy tie, and I think it also frees them. How does this work when it comes to ourselves?
Self-forgiveness is often the hardest one for people. I think because they know themselves so well, and some people can be too hard on themselves. And it's so important to do that, and I do it quickly. I mess up, and I don't spend a week beating myself up or ruminating over it. Yes, if I need to do things better, yes. If there's something that I did, that if I have to repair something, yes. But we're hard on ourselves, like I shouldn't have said that, or maybe that was misunderstood, or, just...
I think watching how you speak to yourself, right? And you taught me this, like, even those little things like, oh, I'm such an idiot, or like, that was so stupid.
Yeah, so when it comes to forgiving yourself, it's the same process. It's just that sometimes people are harder on themselves and they don't trust themselves. It's like, yeah, well, if I forgive myself, then maybe I'm going to continue. Maybe I'll mess up again. But I will say, if I did that to you, would you think I was worthy of forgiving myself? And they'd say, yes, of course. Like, would you be so hard on someone else? And a lot of times we're not. It's just we're harder on ourselves.
The example that comes to me, that's not one that's personal to me, but is someone in relapse, right? Someone that's trying to stay clean and sober, and then they relapse. If they stay in that shame of I'm bad, or that guilt, I did something bad, and they don't forgive themselves, it's likely they're going to stay in that relapse. Because I've accompanied people to Narcotics Anonymous, and they say when you relapse, you've got to take it seriously, acknowledge the debt, right? Acknowledge that you were clean and sober, and then you relapsed, acknowledge that, and then get right back up and commit again to yourself.
Exactly.
The same thing as a more lightweight version is working out. I'm going to do this for my health and my well-being, and then you slip up. They say, don't stay in that. Get back up and just determine that you are going to get back on track for yourself because you're worth it.
Yes. So with self-forgiveness, it's really the same process, and it's also a choice.
Great stuff. Thank you for sharing that personal story too, Mom. So there's one question I like to ask everyone who is a guest on my show. If you could know how and or when you would die, would you want to know, and why?
I wouldn't want to know because I don't think we're supposed to know. I'd rather things play out the way they're supposed to. That's it.
There you go. On an end note, what's one practice that helps you stay connected to forgiveness and compassion?
I feel that I can do that by being aware of the feelings that I have. When I'm losing my peace, when I'm feeling agitated, annoyed, those are usually the key symptoms for me. Then I know something's not settled, and I need to take a look a little bit deeper and see, is there something that's going on that I need to identify what it is, take account of the debt, and release it.
You have to feel it to heal it.
Yes. When I do that, it's gone. Now, if there's more, then look at that as well. So that's the practice I do. I try to be, it's more of an awareness. It's a practice I do based on trying to be keenly aware, like, why am I just feeling agitated today? What happened? What is there that's off with me?
It's putting yourself through self-reflection.
Yes.
Well, thank you so much for taking the time, Mama, and for teaching me these principles and sharing them with our listeners.
It's been my pleasure.
Thanks for visiting.
Thank you.